listener production.
Hi, Natarsha Belling with you and welcome to the afternoon edition of The Briefing. Coming up in our deep dive, a divided states of America, the fallout from the assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk, the US president blaming the radical left after the 31-year-old was shot dead in front of thousands while speaking at a university campus in Utah. We'll unpack the latest developments and the serious implications for a country rocked by growing political violence. But first, let's check the afternoon headlines this Thursday, the 11th of September. The ANU Chancellor, Julie Bishop, has broken her silence over bullying and harassment allegations. Last month, during a Senate inquiry, ANU Council member Liz Allen accused Miss Bishop of bullying, harassment and hostile behaviour. Miss Bishop had this response when questioned today about the allegations.
I heard these allegations for the first time on the 12th of August as levelled against me. I reject them and I look forward to a process that is not compromised and in fact looks after the interests of all stakeholders, the complainants, the respondents and all those who are witnesses to the events in question. There are no grounds for me to stand aside.
It comes as the ANU's Vice-Chancellor, Genevieve Bell, resigns from her position after months of controversy over major staff cuts and governance concerns. Federal opposition leader Sussan Ley has apologised to the Australian Indian community after Jacinta Nampijinpa Price's controversial remarks on migration led to her removal from the Shadow Ministry. Senator Price claimed in an ABC interview that Labor was favouring particular countries for migration, signalling out the Indian community as, quote, Labor-leaning. Her comments sparked a major fallout within the embattled Liberal Party, with coalition members meeting with Indian community groups to apologise. Here is Miss Ley speaking earlier.
May I take this opportunity as leader of the Liberal Party to apologise to all Indian Australians and indeed others who were hurt and distressed by the comments that were made.
And Prince Harry has met with his father, King Charles, for the first time in almost 2 years in London. The reunion comes as Harry marks the 3rd anniversary of Queen Elizabeth II's death. The last time the pair met was in February 2024, when Prince Harry rushed to London after learning of his father's cancer diagnosis. Harry reportedly spent around 45 minutes with his father before King Charles departed for Sandringham. Now it's time to get into our deep dive on the assassination of conservative US activist Charlie Kirk. As the search continues for the person responsible for the shooting, the political fallout has already begun. A defiant US President Donald Trump promising a crackdown after this latest assassination, labelling the shooting of his key Republican ally as radical left terrorism. But many experts are deeply concerned this latest killing will only inflame an already deeply divided America. Joining us now is US political expert John Barron. John, thanks so much for joining us. May we start by asking you to explain exactly who Charlie Kirk is, the conservative activist that was shot and killed at a university earlier today, our time.
Tash, Charlie Kirk is quite a phenomenon in American politics. He started a conservative student organisation in 2012 called Turning Point. At the time, it was a young conservatives' reaction to the Obama administration, just as the Tea Party movement at the time was concerned about what they perceived as being sort of encroaching socialism and anti-Americanism in the Obama era, although objectively Barack Obama was a very moderate sort of centrist figure. They portrayed him as being very left-wing. So Charlie Kirk started this organisation to push back against what he perceived as left-wing bias on university campuses. And for the last 13 years, he has spent a lot of time going to university campuses, giving young people a conservative alternative to what he saw as being the progressive left-wing doctrine of a lot of academics. So not surprising that it was at a university campus in the conservative state of Utah, where Charlie Kirk was shot and killed. This is something that he does often, to take questions from all comers, all students, as provocative as they like to be, and to give his particular worldview to them. On top of that, his political organisation became very, very important to Donald Trump's political operation in his 2024 campaign, spending literally hundreds of millions of dollars to motivate many of those same younger voters to support a more conservative candidate in Donald Trump over Kamala Harris. He ran their Get Out the Vote operation, which, when you have non-compulsory voting in the United States, where particularly young people often just don't bother to vote, he was able to mobilise enough of them to get more young people voting for Donald Trump to potentially have made a very significant difference in last year's election campaign. So Donald Trump saw him as a close political ally, as well as being somebody who's influential in spreading conservative thought amongst younger people.
So in regards to his influence, you've just unpacked a couple of the details there, John. He also had a huge social media presence. He was a very popular podcaster. He also had millions of followers on all different social media platforms. How instrumental was he in moving that conservative vote with younger Americans, especially the universities?
One of the things that he was able to do extremely effectively, Tash, was to tap into the discontent that younger people feel, particularly those who came of age after the global financial crisis, who tended to blame Democrats, Barack Obama and then Joe Biden, for the fact that life was hard. Their ability to hold down a job in the gig economy was diminished. Their hopes of being able to buy their own home one day, housing prices, like in Australia, housing prices have gone up dramatically in the United States. So for many people in the United States under the age of 30, the American dream of owning your own home and having a job for life and a stable family, maybe kids if you want it, had become more elusive. Critics of Charlie Kirk, though, would say, Tash, that a lot of his arguments, the resentments that he was feeding into, where he would blame immigrants and foreign aid and diversity, equity and inclusion programs, affirmative action policies, he would blame all of them for why younger white Americans were missing out on the good jobs, on the good college educations, because Democrats, he argued, were making it easier for black and brown folks to go to universities and get good jobs. And so he said a lot of things over the years, Tash, that many saw as white supremacism, outright racism. And yet, despite or even because of that, he was, as you say, very popular and very influential on social media as a podcaster. And to be fair to him, he was more than just another slightly racist right-wing dude with a podcast. He was an influential conservative thinker who helped to provide some, I suppose, philosophical underpinnings to what Donald Trump rather more instinctively understood about white economic and racial resentment.
At the time that he was assassinated, we know that he actually was shot in the neck, and there's very, very graphic video online of this because there were many people that were in the audience at the time. When Charlie was shot, he was shot in the neck from some distance away. At the time of this recording, the offender the shooter is still at large, with authorities searching for them. Do you think this was a specifically targeted attack regarding assassinating Charlie Kirk? And also the timing when the shot was fired, he was talking about gun control and transgender shooters?
Yeah, it was perhaps a tragic irony or just a tragic coincidence that Charlie Kirk was answering a question from an audience member about mass shootings in the United States. And it sounded as though, although he never finished his answer when he was shot, that he was trotting out a fairly standard conservative argument against the concerns about mass shootings in the United States, to say, well, most of them are really just gang-related. There isn't the epidemic of mass shootings that you might be led to believe by the mainstream media. We don't know, of course, at this point as we speak, Tash, who the perpetrator was and what their motivations were. And often, of course, the motivations in these cases are quite complicated and difficult to discern, even if we can ever discern them. Last year, the would-be assassin of Donald Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania, was a registered Republican who on paper should have been a supporter of Donald Trump, who also, according to his online postings, had researched and plotted to kill Joe Biden as well as Donald Trump. So he perhaps fits more the profile of the fixated individual wanting to make themselves notorious or famous by killing another famous person. The assassination of John Lennon in 1980, another example of that, the would-be assassin of Ronald Reagan in 1981. Again, not politically motivated by a desire for fame, by killing a famous person. So there are plenty of potential motivations here other than politics. So we just wait and see what becomes of that. Logistically, of course, we understand the shooter was possibly 100 metres or so away from where Charlie Kirk was. So this is a sniper's style shooting. It's unlikely that they would have been able to hear Charlie Kirk unless they were watching a live stream, for example. So as to whether they timed it because of what was being said, or it just so happened that that was when they got the shot off towards Charlie Kirk, we await to find more information on that.
Just hours after Charlie was assassinated, the US President Donald Trump took to social media and released a statement. This is some of what the US President had to say earlier today.
For years, those on the radical left have compared wonderful Americans like Charlie to Nazis and the world's worst mass murderers and criminals. This kind of rhetoric is directly responsible for the terrorism that we're seeing in our country today.
John, what's your reaction to that statement from the US President?
Tash, it's understandable that Donald Trump, particularly being a victim of violence himself with the attempted assassination last year, it's understandable, given how well he knew Charlie Kirk, that he would be upset. That, however, I don't think forgives the fact that as President of the United States, it's his job to unify and calm emotions in America rather than repeatedly dividing America, blaming the left for shooting Charlie Kirk when we do not know who shot him and why. And then going through, as he did in that 4-minute address from the Oval Office of the White House, from behind the president's resolute desk, he went through a list of violence which he attributed to left-wingers, even though, including, as we mentioned, his own assassination attempt was not cut and dried. And amongst those, he didn't even bother to mention the most recent and deadly attack, which was against a Minnesota state Democrat, Melissa Horton, and her husband, shot and killed at their own front door by a Trump supporter posing as a policeman, who also shot and wounded another Democratic politician and their spouse on the very same night. Trump didn't mention that at all. So it's a bit rich for Donald Trump to accuse his political rivals of being divisive. And frankly, it is hypocritical of him to accuse his rivals of violence. That being said, nobody would seek to justify what has happened to Charlie Kirk today, or indeed what happened to Donald Trump last year. On both sides of politics, people agree in the United States that they need to tone down the rhetoric and they need to end the political violence. But you can't use events such as this to say that nobody can criticise Charlie Kirk or Donald Trump or Kamala Harris or Joe Biden or anybody else. It's the way you go about criticising them. It's the way you dehumanise them. As for whether Charlie Kirk was rightly accused of being a fascist, well, I do note, Tash, that there were plenty of people who said that he was a racist or expressed racist views, whether he felt himself he was racist or not. White supremacists such as Nick Fuente described Charlie Kirk as a white supremacist. They bemoaned the fact that he wasn't as anti-Jew as Nick Fuente would like. Donald Trump had dinner with Nick Fuente and Kanye West at Mar-a-Lago 2 years ago. Donald Trump's hands aren't clean in all of this. He has pandered to extremism. He has used violent rhetoric. He's used violence against American citizens and international citizens. He ordered the killing of 11 people in a boat in the Caribbean last week because he believed that they were drug smugglers. There was no evidence of that. Donald Trump has used violence, so he's not really in a position to condemn it in others.
So, John, in regards to, as you just mentioned, we know that there is incredible division and hatred ripping apart America from both sides at the moment. How much of a concerning escalation is this assassination and subsequently Donald Trump's statement there? Considering when you look back at what happened in the January 6 riots, how concerning is this for already the division in a divided United States of America?
This is, of course, Tash, something that we have seen in the United States, not just for decades, but for centuries. We have seen assassinations in the past, and we have seen violent rhetoric in the past. We have seen political figures, including presidents and presidential candidates, killed in the past. With better technology and better security, we've seen less of that in the last 4 decades. But you're right, in recent weeks and months, we have seen a number of incidents. We've seen attacks on the Pennsylvania governor, Josh Shapiro's home, a firebombing, forcing his family to flee. We have seen the husband of the Speaker, former Speaker of the House of Representatives, Paul Pelosi, Nancy Pelosi's husband, beaten almost to death with a hammer in his own home. Donald Trump joked about that repeatedly. So there is a lot of blame. There are victims on both sides in all of this. The question is whether Donald Trump bears some responsibility, whether the broader American culture bears some responsibility, whether partisan media bears responsibility, social media bears some responsibility. It's probably an all of the above answer, Tash, but chances are we're going to see, just as we've seen members of Congress shot at public events in recent years, now seeing media figures or political activists who also have a strong media presence being targeted. It could well mean that we just don't see figures like Charlie Kirk going to campuses or less secure locations, that they will stay in their podcast studios and they'll be posting their opinions online in greater safety. That may be an inevitable outcome from all of this, because right now there are people on the left and people on the right who have a visceral hatred, there will be some people on the left, no doubt, cheering the fact that Charlie Kirk was killed. Some of the same people probably were hoping that Donald Trump would die last year. Those are the stakes in American politics. Politics does feel like a life and death battle sometimes in the United States, and sometimes indeed it is. The sorts of issues that are resolved at the ballot box in the United States also do invite strong passions and violence. But I tend to see America as yes, it can devolve in certain ways, but there is a continuity here as well. Violence is not new, sadly, in American politics.
We appreciate your insight once again, John. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Tash.
That was US politics expert and host of Planet America, John Barron. And that's it for this episode of the afternoon edition of The Briefing. We'd love you to subscribe or follow us on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast. And we'll be back in your feed tomorrow morning. I'm Natarsha Belling. Thanks for your company.